Check the description for the following discount codes.
I've been really fortunate in that the guys at Race at Home, Bob and Aaron, have offered to lend me kind of long term one of their lowrider kits, which is traction loss and surge, and also a set of PT actuators. They're not the current Scorpion model, they're the previous model, which is the Mega Monsters, I believe. So I won't sort of show you in detail those because they're not actually the current ones. They do perform the same, 250 mil a second of movement, I believe. If I just look at the spec on here, yes. And 150 mil of travel. I think the Scorpions are the same spec, but they just slightly sort of revised the design. But I've got the old Mega Monster ones there. They had these sort of kicking about. They're not things they could sell retail, so lending them to me isn't too much of a big deal. And this lowrider you see here is also one, I believe, that's got a few extra holes drilled in it and stuff, kind of like a final prototype. So whilst it's been freshly powder coated and it does look nice, it might ever so slightly, to the trained eye, differ from perhaps what you'd receive in a retail package. Now, talking about retail packaging, again, this didn't come retail packaged. The guys actually drove down here from Leicester and delivered it all for me. They were going to help me assemble it. It hasn't come with any instructions, but I needed to raise up my monitors and do some other bits and pieces first. So I thought it was easier just to to do it myself. I want to record it anyway. So it's actually, it's super simple to put together. I'll get the camera and I'll walk you through that in a second. But this, how it looks here, may not be exactly how it looks if you were to buy it. And again, I'll talk about that in a second. But that's what I'm doing today. Installing the lowrider and then fitting the 4 PT actuators to my GT Amiga Prime cockpit and then getting that on top of the lowrider. And this is all by myself because no one else is home at the moment. So we'll see how that goes because this lowrider is pretty heavy. And of course, my whole rig is pretty heavy as well. So we'll see what I can do. My cat's here, but I don't think Ori's going to be able to help me much as she does like to get involved in things. But let's get the camera and I'll show you what we've got and roughly what you'll get sort of retail type scenario should you buy one of these lowriders. So we've got 2 big, in my case, white pieces. Don't forget you can have this powder coated however you wanted. Now my missus actually said, can we have white, Carl? So I said to Bob, can we have white? So we've got mother of pearl here. And then what he actually said to me was, Carl, can we do the bits that move from the bits that don't in a contrasting colour so that, sort of on camera you'll see more easily where things are moving and how they're moving. I said, Bob, do whatever you want, mate. I said, I appreciate you loaning me the hardware in the first place. So we've got like a candy red alongside mother of pearl white. So as it comes, I believe the only thing you have to do is join these 2 pieces together here, which I'll show you how to do in a second. And I think that black shaft, I'm going to call it at the end there, you may have to bolt on 2. Now for me, I had to bolt on this bracket here and my shaft was actually already bolted in place. And I think this actuator will already be attached to that section there. They bought the wrong one with them when they delivered it. So this one's just arrived through the post today, so I've got to install that. But yeah, there isn't really much to do. The way these 2 base plates join together, a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, that shape slots in there and the same the other side. And then these little brackets go over the top like that. 3 bolts, one either side and one that goes through into the middle there, just to keep these 2 bits sort of cinched together. There's also some non-slip rubber backing on the underneath of this, and that's designed to work both on carpet and hard floors. Now, the only other thing I actually had to do was there's like 4 little rollers or bearings or almost like feet, you might call them. They bolt on with just this big nut and 2 washers in the middle here. I just had to put them under from underneath and obviously do them up, and there's one on each corner, and that's what allows it to sort of roll around on the base plate when it's moving backwards and forwards and left and right. So they took all of 5 minutes to do. I don't know whether yours would come pre-installed and it was just mine because they were still sealed in their bag, so they hadn't been installed yet. But yeah, that's, in fact, you can just about make out one, just about make it out there. There's actually like a nylon ball in the bottom of that to allow it to roll around on here. And I believe they're going to be changing the nylon balls for something else. So again, it's slightly prototype-ish here, but that's essentially all you do. Bolt that together, pick this up, and you see this bearing here, that's got a slot over that shaft there, and that's where it will rotate left to right. So again, I've got to try and pick this up and put it on there. Now the other thing I've got to do is get this base plate in exactly the right place over there, because once that's on top of that, there's no way I'm going to be able to move it. So that's what I'm going to do. Get this together, get it over there, then try and get that on there. Then I think I'll install that actuator last, because it's just going to make that piece even heavier. And then once that's in place, get those 4 mega monsters that are on the floor there and bolt them to my rig. They simply bolt on using these PT actuator brackets here. They bolt to the side of your aluminium profile in an upright position like that. And then the actual actuators themselves bolt on there, I think, looking at the bolt pattern. Yeah, they do. So it's really, really easy. I'm not going to do, close-ups of me doing this. It's like, if you can't bolt that to your aluminium profile with some T-nuts, and you can't put 4 bolts on there, then you probably shouldn't be looking at buying a motion kit, should you? And the same goes for this, really. So I'll record it, and I'll probably roll it sped up, but it's so simple to do, or at least it looks it. We'll see, of course, in a minute when I actually get cracking with getting it done. Well, I think I'm going to stop this recording here. Oh, sorry, holding the mic in my hand. I'm going to stop this recording here because I'm knackered. It's taken me about 2.5 hours-ish, and that's to assemble, maybe 3 hours even, and that's to assemble the lowrider and obviously talk to you guys on camera and fit the 4 actuators to my Prime, which, as I say, they all just bolt on, and I will get the camera and do a little walk around, but I'll do that another day, because what I'm going to do now, all that's left to do, I mean, you won't have seen it in slow-mo in real time, but you'll see it sped up. I actually managed to build this entire thing on my own and lift my GT Amiga Prime with 4 actuators on, steering wheel, pedals, shifter, handbrake, fan, seat, the absolute lot, onto the lowrider on my own. So, because there's no one else here, but also I thought it'd be interesting to see whether you can do it on your own. So should you be someone that doesn't live with anyone else and you're thinking to yourself, how on earth would I get that on there? The answer is you can. You just walk it on. Left, right, left, right, left, right, in one cup, lift up in the other, and the rear two just fall into the bottom cups as well. So it was actually pretty easy, I'll be honest, and I'm quite pleased. But I got an achy back from being bent down and what have you. I have back trouble. So I'm going to leave it here for today. All I've genuinely just got to do now is just plug the wires in and fire up the Sim Racing Studio software and spend the next few days tweaking and tuning. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a rest now. Over the next few days, I'll get it all tweaked and tuned and set up nicely. And I'll come back to you with a little walk around of it all installed. The lid will be back on the booth here as well, and hopefully I actually guessed
the height of where these monitors are going to need to be. Hopefully they're in about the right place, because they can't actually go any higher on the stands that they're on. But anyway, when you speak to me next, or when I speak to you next even, it'll be a few days in the future, and I'll have tweaked everything. I'll be able to do a nice little demo for you all. So see you in a few days. We'll get straight into the walk around of the installation. Obviously it has been a few days now and everything's all running sweet. So this is obviously the low rider itself, the bottom piece from this cup downwards, and I believe that's 15 centimeters high. Yeah, not 15 mil, that would be tiny. 15 centimeters high from the floor. So one of the things I like about this install is just how little space it really takes up. You know, that's the maximum width at the rear. It does taper in toward the front because that's where it pivots, but it doesn't raise your rig up stupidly high, and it's just super neat and tidy. I am quite a big fan of this. You can see the other actuator for your surge in the center there. Obviously that's the traction loss actuator at the back there. We've got our 4 other PT actuators, which are actually, as some of you may notice, a different color to the ones I showed you in the first video. It's a bit dark in here. Let me just put some extra light on. Yeah, the reason for that is that originally I had the monsters, as I explained in the first video. These, what you see here, are the Scorpions, the latest ones. And as I said in the first video, they just bolt on for this side, for the other side, and then up to 6, I believe, through here into your profile. Really, really easy. Ignore the cable management that's just laying there for now. I haven't got round to sorting it out. I've cable tied a few things in place, but not everything. But yeah, it's, you know, oh yeah, the monitors, by the way, they just about went high enough. I may even have an inch to spare, but they are all the way up, and I adjusted the height of the actuators, the vertical actuators, accordingly to get it so that my eyes are sort of central in the middle of the screens, as they should be. The roof or the headlining is back on, and we're all looking, you know, relatively neat and tidy. Now, the reason we have Scorpion actuators and not the monster ones from the first half of this video, I'll very briefly explain. Me and Bob thought there was a problem with them, so we swapped them out for these ones. He very kindly drove all the way down from Leicester with these, and we swapped them out. Didn't make any difference to the problem, and it turns out there was a problem with one of the settings in the Thanos unit, which is just down here. It literally just one setting needed changing from 0 to 1, and this strange noise that I was getting out of them immediately stopped. So poor old Bob made the trip down here and swapped these out for absolutely nothing. But thank you very much anyway, Bob. It was a head scratcher. The pair of us were struggling to figure out what it was. But speaking of noise, I don't know whether the microphone will pick this up, but the servo drivers in this sort of control unit here make a very high-pitched whine. I'll just be quiet and I'll see if you can hear it on my mic. Now it is super high-pitched, this noise. A lot of people will have lost that part of their hearing. I don't know if you know this, but the older we get, we lose the high frequency sound sort of pickup. Yeah, we lose the upper part of our hearing range. Typically in our mid to late 20s, I believe it is, the very top end, we just can't hear it anymore. But I haven't lost this, which in this case is irritating, because I can hear this plain as day, really high pitch sort of squeal. Now when I'm in the sim and I've got the game sounds on, I can't hear it. But standing here now, recording this video and walking around, there's just this real uncomfortable high pitched sound. It's very similar to those animal scarers you can get to put in your garden, your back and front garden, that have a PIR sensor. So when a cat or a fox or something walks past, it emits a really high pitched sound that only young children and sort of teenagers and animals are supposed to be able to hear. But I can hear those plain as day as well, and it is horribly uncomfortable. It's not something I'd want to stand around for long. And this is very, very similar. Like I wouldn't, it's like a high pitch whine or whistle. It's just a nasty sound. But apparently PT Actuator have developed some new servo drivers that don't do this. And also you can sort of just put some cloth or some sound deadening or anything around the box if you do happen to hear it. I think Bob actually used a wine refrigerator in one of the demonstrations he showed me, and you won't hear it. But most of us shouldn't be able to hear it anyway, but I can. But aside from that, everything's all working as it should do. I'm going to jump in some Dirt Rally to do a demonstration of it all in motion, because Dirt Rally obviously has a lot of aggressive vehicle movements, whereas your normal sort of circuit-based sims, not a lot, you know, a little bit of up and down, but you shouldn't really be sliding the back end out, you know, and things like that, because that's a very slow way to get around a circuit. In Dirt Rally, of course, sliding the back end out is how we corner. So demonstrating particularly the low rider part of this, which is the traction loss and the surge, Dirt Rally is going to be perfect for that. I mean, you've all seen actuators, you know, moving rigs up and down and what have you before, so that's nothing out of the ordinary. And these perform, you know, just as well as any others I've used. The only thing I will say is they are a touch noisier. They're not noisy, but I can hear them more than I can. What have I been on recently? Some D-Box ones. And was it Pro Simu ones? I can't remember the one. But they were definitely a little bit quieter. Like with this at idle, and I mean engine idle, so at the start line, you can hear the oscillation a little bit. It's not too loud. You can just hear that they are moving, and of course they are moving. So this isn't, you know, it's not unexpected. But their performance, the way they respond, you know, when you get your lumps and bumps, it's perfectly in time with what you see on the screen in front of you as well, and that's what it needs to be. You know, you can see if there's a delay or a lag, because if you see your vehicle move over a bump on the screen in front of you, and then the motion happens afterwards, that obviously wouldn't be any good. But this, you know, this all works really, really well, and Dirt Rally really does throw you around. So let me get some footage of that. But overall, like, I'm super pleased. And again, a big thanks to Bob. This is on kind of like a long-term loan for me. You know, he's not giving it to me, but you know, I can have it for sort of 6 months or so, maybe a bit longer, depending how it goes. You know, and all he's asked is that I do this sort of feature video now, you know, showing you how to install it, you know, and how it functions and what have you, and perhaps give him a shout out from time to time when I'm doing gameplay videos. And I'm like, that's absolutely fair enough. I have no problem doing that. You know, I'm more grateful that I'm able to borrow this stuff, you know, and have it here in my home. So thank you, Bob. It is appreciated. And that's Bob from Race at Home. Should you want to have a look, there'll be a link in the description, of course, as well. So let's get in the seat and have a little play.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Keep middle of a jump. 100 for right of the crest and dip. 6 left of the crest long. Onto the crest. 100. Flat right of the crest. Onto the crest. To keep middle of the jump. To keep middle of the crest and flat left. 50. Keep middle
Well, that is thirsty work. Playing dirt rally is hard enough without being thrown all over the place. You know, some of those big jumps and drops in that stage, you really impact the ground. Like my whole room shakes here because we've got wooden floorboards upstairs. It's just an insane experience. Like, I mean, and that's your 4 vertical actuators, obviously doing all that. But you know, going back to what I said in the review of the lowrider that I did when I went up to race at home to check it out, even though having those vertical effects where you're being thrown up and down and what have you are really very good, especially for rally. You know, you don't tend to feel, you don't do big jumps in most circuit-based sims. A lot of what the vertical actuators can do, which is replicate road texture and lumps and bumps, can actually be replaced with 4 transducers, 1 on each corner of the rig, for a fraction of the price. Now obviously you won't get any sort of pitch or roll using tactile transducers, but you can get all the textures, the curbs, the lumps and bumps, and even when you do a big jump in dirt rally, you still get this sort of moment where you've left the ground and everything's just smooth, and then when you impact again, all 4 transducers, or 6 if you run them, give you a big wallop. So you can replace a lot of what the vertical transducers, actuators do with transducers. But what you can't replace with transducers is traction loss or surge. That's just impossible. You know, the feeling of acceleration when you actually put your foot down. You know, because with that, I get pushed forward 150 mil is the maximum travel, and I have it tilt backwards just a tiny little bit to sort of replicate a vehicle squatting under hard acceleration, but not much, only a little bit. And that works really well because that is actually what happens in real life when you accelerate in a powerful car, or even a non-powerful car. If you just pin the revs and dump the clutch, you tilt back a little bit and obviously you launch forward. And this is what you can do with surge that you can't do with any other form of sort of motion. Without physically being pushed forward, you can't replicate being pushed forward. It's just impossible. And the same with the traction loss, because this pivots at a point at the front, which is exactly what would happen in a real car if you lose traction at the rear. Where you're actually pivoting is your steering wheels, the body of the car is rotating, and if you let go of your steering wheel, your front wheels stay in the same place. And this is what you do when you drift. You let go of the wheel, or you throw it in the opposite direction. If you kept the wheel held straight like this, the whole car would rotate, and that's when you spin round. But when you want to drift or slide, like in a rally game, you either counter steer aggressively, or you let go of the wheel and then you catch it again when it's in the right place, and you allow the back of the car to rotate around the front wheels. This is exactly how this traction loss system here works on the lowrider. The pivot at the front, which is effectively your front wheels, and then the back of the car moving left to right, in my case 200 mil, because I've got a 200 mil actuator. And in the likes of dirt rally, hopefully it looks good in the footage, you'll see me sliding round corners and just the car just naturally, or my rig, sorry, just naturally moves, you know, with it in the right direction. Now this all takes a lot of tweaking and tuning to get right, because you need it to move as close to 1-to-1 as what your eyes see in the simulator. If it doesn't, then you can get motion sickness, which I actually do suffer with in VR, as some of you already know, but also in simulators like this, if it isn't set up properly. What doesn't help with this particular sim, Dirt Rally, is it doesn't support bloody triple monitors. So I've had to dick about with the field of view and the sort of settings I choose not being in the cockpit, because having a distorted, bent image around you just makes you feel awful if you suffer with motion sickness. What I've got there seems to be the best compromise, and I'll do a video about that separately. But the traction loss and the surge would still for me be at the top of my list of motion. If you're looking to get into motion, you're thinking, should I get actuators that lift me up and down and tilt me forwards and backwards and left to right? Should I get a low rider which has traction loss and surge? I still think traction loss and surge, the low rider, would be the way to go, because you can genuinely replicate acceleration, obviously only up to 150 mil of travel. You can't keep accelerating, can't drive through the side of your house, and you can accurately represent traction loss because it pivots at the front, the back slides out left to right once you've tuned this to be one-to-one with what you're seeing. The same goes for the acceleration. When you accelerate and the cockpit surges forward, in a lot of titles, like ACC for example, the visuals, you see the cockpit in the game surge forward as well. You must match the movement you're feeling to the movement you're seeing for it to feel right. Again, Dirt Rally doesn't do this because it's crap, basically, in that respect. So it's not as important. But you need to get it so it feels right, or you get this disconnection. And this is all comes down to the tuning. There's a chap called Jeff who does a lot of like sort of baseline tunes for Sim Racing Studio for their motion stuff, and that's what I've started with and begun to tweak from there. One of the things Jeff had that I don't like or necessarily even agree with is under braking there was quite an aggressive tilt forwards, and whilst in a real car when you brake heavily the car will nosedive a little bit, it is only a little bit, it's not a huge tilt forwards. You know, and again, braking is one of the things you struggle to replicate in the simulator. Well, in fact, technically it's impossible because we don't have inertia. We're not actually traveling forwards, you know, so that when you then apply brakes, there is something slowing us down. You know, I could go down an endless rabbit hole of talking about motion here. But basically, you know, in real life, our bodies are moving forward at a certain speed, and when you brake to slow yourself down, your body's still trying to move forward and continues to move forward the entire time. At no point does it ever go backwards. It's always moving forward as you're braking. It's just gradually decelerating, and you're being held and slowed down by your harness or your seat belts. You're not physically being tipped forward, and you're not physically being pulled backwards, which is what you could do with this surge actuator here. You could have it sort of yoink you backwards quite hard, but again, the only time you ever get pulled backwards in a car in real life is when you're in reverse and you dump the clutch, then you get pulled backwards quite aggressively. When you're braking, you're not being pulled backwards, you're being slowed down whilst always 100% of the time still moving forwards until the vehicle reaches a complete stop. So yeah, slightly sidetracked there, but yeah, I would still get a lowrider first and foremost if my budget was limited to one piece of motion only, and I would add 4 tactile transducers to give me all the lumps and bumps and drops and big bangs that you might get in something like Dirt Rally. And that would be a really good compromise if you didn't have then the other, whatever the other 4 are, 8 grand or something to get the 4 vertical actuators. But if you can, then you really should, because there is nothing like launching up off of a jump in Dirt Rally and being lifted up, because again, that's what happens in real life. When you go off of a jump, you are actually being lifted up, and then when you come down and hit the ground, they drop you down and you hit the ground with a bang, and then you sort of spring back up as the suspension levels out. It is amazing. No word of a lie, you know, it is amazing, but obviously it's very, very expensive. And again, if you can't afford any motion whatsoever, I still say after a good wheelbase, 4 tactile transducers should be the very next upgrade. Over wind simulation, over expensive pedals and shifters, good solid wheelbase, get yourself some transducers, because having that feedback about, you know, what the road's doing, your lumps and your bumps is just excellent, and really gets you in the sim a lot more. And that's what we have here with those 4 vertical actuators, obviously, but to a much greater extent than what tactiles can ever do. And these do, of course, replace tactile transducers. You don't need tactile transducers if you have 4 actuators, because rather than having to simulate driving over lumps and bumps by vibrating the rig, you actually go over lumps and bumps because the rig moves and lifts you up and down as you're going over those textures and those curbs and what have you. So there's never any need to run tactile transducers, you know, alongside 4 actuators. They also do your engine vibration, as I mentioned earlier. All of this, because vibrations are effectively what you feel because of something moving, whether it's driving over a surface, whether it's an engine just
sort of lightly vibrating and moving and wobbling on its hard mounts, just rocking the car a little bit. You know, if it's a V8 and you're giving it a good rev, it's all movement translating to a feeling of a lump or a bump. So when you can actually move your chassis, your cockpit, like you can with those 4 upright ones, they do a perfect job of replicating that in real life. Again, when you tune it all properly, and this can take hours, I've still got a lot of tuning and tweaking to do, but I just wanted to share, you know, the fun I've been. I mean, I'm literally sweating. The back of my t-shirt is wet from playing that for half an hour. I mean, those plastic PU fake leather seats don't help because they're not breathable, but you know, it's the way it goes. But it's such an intense experience. My arms and shoulders ache from frantic steering. You know, it's just such a good experience. So a big thank you to Bob from Race at Home. And should you want a low rider, you're thinking about motion, it is a solid recommendation. It is so low profile as well. It doesn't raise your rig up too much. Footprint isn't massive. And I think for the money, which is 3.6, something like that, yes, motion's expensive. You only buy it if you can afford it. It's a big boy's toy. But if you can afford it and you like your toys, then go grab one. It is pretty special. And if you've got the extra bucks for actuators, whether they're PT actuators from Bob at Race at Home, you know, alongside his lowrider, or whether you choose actuator from someone else, doesn't matter. If you can afford this sort of motion, it's just something else. It really is. Takes simulated racing to a whole new level. Anyway, enough of my waffleage. There will be links to Race at Home in the description. Bob is also a really top guy. And again, thanks for the loan, Bob. I will be making very good use of it and enjoying myself. But as always, thank you very much for watching, everyone, and take it easy.